I deeply appreciate the opportunity to discuss these preliminary recommendations, to discuss the process, to discuss the approach that we have taken, as well as to discuss these recommendations that are aimed at reshaping the University of Montana for an exciting future, a future to best meet the needs of our current students and the students who will be attending this university in the future. This is the beginning of a discussion of these preliminary recommendations. And I approach this discussion seeking to learn, to listen, and I deeply appreciate Chair Bowman's comments that this is a key role that our faculty governance plays, that our other shared governance groups play in being part of this process. Shared governance is a critical part of any university. And I want to thank this community's commitment to meaningful shared governance, to meaningful discussion, to dialogue, debate. I expect and expect that debate will sometimes be tough, but that is how we should endeavor to work together. And I deeply appreciate this community's engagement and commitment to that process. I think we owe a great deal of thanks to a large number of people. This, as I mentioned, is really the beginning of a discussion of preliminary recommendations, but this stems from a nearly 2-year-long process that began in 2016 with the work of the Strategic Planning Coordinating Committee and the members on that and the thousands of data points and reflections and insights that group gathered from this community, from our faculty, from our staff, from our students, from community members. This work builds upon the work of the APAS committee during much of 2017. Long days, long nights, long working sessions, analyzing data and prioritizing our programs. And this work builds upon the work of the University Planning Committee, a group of leaders selected by our shared governance groups to participate in a discussion on the reshaping of the future of this university. So I want to thank all of those who've been involved in these efforts over the past 2 years. I want to especially thank the co-conveners of the UPC. I want to thank Megan Stark, not just a faculty member, but also a leader in the UFA. I want to thank Braden Fitzgerald, the president of ASUM, as a co-convener, and I also want to thank Paul Kurgis, our interim provost. The amount of work that has gone into this over the past few months has been tremendous. And we owe a great debt of gratitude, not just to those co-conveners, but every member of the UPC. And I also want to call out in particular one individual, Kelly Webster, who I will tell you there's not a single person on this campus who cares more about our students and has worked harder and given more of herself personally for this university than Kelly Webster. And she has been integral to this process, and it's very important to recognize those who have committed their work to us. So can you please go to the next page? I don't have a... Oh, okay. So I want to emphasize a point that Marianne made very wisely. That is at the core of all of these efforts over the past 2 years has been the question of what is best for our students and what is best for this state of Montana. We have an incredibly important role as leaders. We are co-leaders of an institution of public higher education. Our role, and not just this city, this state, this country, has arguably never been more important in providing access to a high quality, affordable education. One of the things that I have come to realize is that in this job in particular is that, and you'll hear me say it, we are not Harvard, we are not Stanford. We have programs that are better than those institutions. And I'd tell you, we give students an opportunity to get an education that's just as good as you could get at those institutions. But one thing we will not do at this institution is stand up here and brag about the fact that we select for admission only 5% or 3% of the people who apply. We accept students from many different walks of life. Core to this institution's mission, core to what we have done and will continue to do, is providing opportunity, providing social mobility for students from all walks of life, all different types of backgrounds, different levels of opportunity. And these considerations, these recommendations, are in light of our obligation to continue to do that as effectively as we possibly can. I want to echo Professor Coffin's comment about the 6 mil levy. I cannot advocate on which way to tell you to vote. I can tell you about the importance of this and what is at stake. And this is something that's very important. I frankly have encouraged our students to get our voter turnout at 75% or higher. I think it was 22% last year. So that's something we can actually move the needle on in a big way. Again, I cannot advocate, and I'm not advocating and telling you which way to vote given my status as a public employee. But I can tell you the facts, and I would echo what Doug shared. But I think this is an important point for all of us to realize as we go through these discussions, is what are we here to do as stewards of this great institution? And I think what is critical here is this is an opportunity for us to illuminate our distinction. And I have a quote on the right side of the page here that I heard Dean Chris Comer say this fall. I should have had his name. I apologize for that. Jenny, you can give my apologies, please, to Chris. But in opening in the dedication of Eck Hall last fall, Chris said we will respect the past and look to the future. And much of what we are doing here is that we are respecting what is great about this institution and looking to the future in terms of how to enhance what we're doing. But there is need for change. And I shared this, and I won't go into the deep details, but I think it is important for us to understand that years of enrollment decline have led to a structural deficit in our budget. We are where we are. The budget, as we articulated in fiscal year 2018, was a $3.5 million structural deficit. And structural deficit means the ongoing expenses and ongoing revenues of an institution. So based on your net tuition revenue, your state funding, and then your costs to deliver that education. We had a stated $3.5 million deficit. However, upon coming on board, one of the things that I immediately asked, because I understood that as things had been adjusted over the past 6 years of an enrollment decline of nearly 30%, and when you have an enrollment decline of 30% in an institution that is tuition dependent, and I think one point of fact to remember is that in 1992, our state funding per student was about double what it is today. And so we are twice as reliant on state or on tuition revenue as we were 25 years ago. And when you have a 30% decline in enrollment, that creates problems. There have been cuts. I recognize there have been budget reductions. But we are still operating at a structural budget deficit. And when you account for costs, ongoing operating costs that need to be adjusted and put into that base budget over the coming 3 years, the actual amount of the structural budget deficit is about $10 million. And there have been questions, how does that make sense? Well, when you look at a reduction in our millage of about $1 million, you look at performance funding differences of about $200,000. Present law of $500,000. Lecturers that weren't accounted for on the general fund, but our teaching instruction of about $1 million. Waivers for students that are here, but those waivers were not accounted for in future years, of about $1 million. And then TAs and having some money that is put into reserves that we have drawn down from, as well as having, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, a budget for recruiting and retention efforts, which had been removed. A university can't operate without some funding for recruiting and retention. We have to restore that funding. So when you add that up, you have a true structural imbalance of the magnitude of about $10 million. So that's not a crisis, as we said in January, but it is not sustainable over the long run. So the question becomes, what do you do about that? And so the process of the UPC, as I articulated, was building upon really 2 years worth of efforts to chart a path forward for this university. And what we're going to articulate today really are three main things. A refreshed mission for the university, an articulation of the university's identity and how we want to embody that mission, and then third, a set of recommendations regarding administrative structures and recommendations regarding academic programs. So I want to take those three deliverables in sequence. I understand that we want to spend a lot of time talking through the recommendations, and we'll get to that, but I think it is important to understand the full context of the University Planning Committee's work as we do so. So first is a refreshed mission statement for the University of Montana. I will not read this mission statement to you. You have it in your documents. You can see it on the screen. The intent of this mission statement is to really simplify and crystallize what this university is here to do. This mission statement was built upon existing documents, was built upon knowledge that we had from input gathered during the SPCC process. I know it received input and feedback over the past couple of months, and this is the final draft that we are seeking feedback on from this body. Upon incorporating that feedback, we will seek approval from the Board of Regents to adopt this as the university's mission statement. Next, and this is important because a mission statement is one thing, but how you embody that mission statement, how you achieve that mission, is incredibly important. And what we've identified as the four key components of the identity of this university. What is the way in which we will distinguish the University of Montana from other institutions? And we've placed it into four main categories. And the first you can see is an innovative UM core. So, as we all know, and I will not say all the quotes that I often do, you can read them in the document. But the students that are coming into this university, we need to equip them with the skills and knowledge in the specific discipline they've chosen to study. But we also need to recognize that we're sending students into an uncertain future. When we look at an 18-year-old signing up for a major, or a 32-year-old signing up for a major, we have to recognize that that individual 10 years down the road is very likely going to be doing something that's different from their major. We need to equip, and we've done a great job as a university over the past 125 years of doing this, equip our students to adapt, to learn, to innovate, to grow over a career of change. That's the world they're entering. That's the world that we need to prepare them for. And that is a way in which this university has excelled, and we must continue to differentiate ourselves on that front. We must own our strength in the humanities, in the arts, in the sciences. That is critical to this university. That is what we've done well, and that's what we must continue to do. Does that mean we do it the exact same way? No. Not necessarily. But that is what a university needs to do for students today. And I think we have a tremendous opportunity to differentiate ourselves by the strength of our core curriculum. We need to prepare students, and you can see it listed here, and you can see it articulated in the document, to think critically, to explore creatively, to live ethically, to communicate effectively. And the UPC spent time. The UPC spent a lot of time exploring what do we mean by that. They used as a basis our ways of knowing course. Something that with which many in this room are familiar. Something where we've seen, I think, a lot of success from students. And we said, how do we really expand upon what we mean by this UM core? How do we expand upon these ways of not just knowing, but ways of communicating, ways of creating, ways of living? And across all of these, enabling cultural awareness and intercultural competence and valuing traditional knowledge that is so important at this university and to our culture here in Montana. We've talked about the phrase of Montana ways as a way to articulate the value of this core curriculum. And I will tell you, this is something that parents and prospective students are thinking about. They're thinking about what majors they want to be in, but they're also thinking about how do they prepare themselves for a world where they're going to see a lot of disruption. They're going to see jobs that used to be high-paying, great jobs that are automated away. I spent a good chunk of my career in the General Electric company, in a division where they designed big gas turbines. We used to have buildings full of drafters and engineers. Those buildings are no longer full of drafters and engineers. The buildings at GE are full of people who can create, who can adapt, who can innovate. And that doesn't mean that technical skills and knowledge aren't important, but they're not enough. We need to equip our students to adapt and to innovate. And that's something we do really well. But with these recommendations, I'm asking this group, our faculty experts, to take a look at our Gen Ed curriculum. To say, are we truly delivering a core curriculum that is streamlined, that is relevant, that prepares students as we should for the world that they're entering? I know there have been discussions starting about this already, and I appreciate the work of ASCRC. I know we've had participation. The UPC group has had participation from the Gen Ed committee in these discussions already. But I also will be asking this body to begin a process to examine our Gen Ed curriculum and how we can deliver that most effectively. And most effectively, not just to prepare students once they leave here, but to help on the issues of student persistence and student success. How we design our curriculum impacts student success. And I don't know where the challenges of that are, but I am going to charge this body and this community to take a look at that and say, if we were starting from scratch, how would we design not just an effective curriculum, but a student-friendly curriculum to enable student persistence, student success? So, the next piece of our distinction are communities of excellence. And so, we have a core curriculum that differentiates us regardless of discipline. And then we took a look at what are those areas of interdisciplinary excellence that sit at the intersection of current areas of strength and societal opportunity and student need. These are areas for which UM is already known, and areas where we as a university should plant a flag in this state and in this region. Or it says, if you're a student who wants to go into health and human development, UM is the place for you. And I'll take that as one example. If you look at the city of Missoula, we have a large population relative to Montana, second largest city in the state. we have a great medical community, and we have a research institution. You don't have those three things in any other city in this state, and frankly anywhere else in the region. So when you think about what should be the health and human development, the health and medicine university of this region, the University of Montana should be just that. When you think about the environment and sustainability, our expertise and our depth in that area is something for which we are known not just regionally but internationally. Now, environment and sustainability encompasses many disciplines across different colleges. But by establishing this community of excellence in the others, we hope to establish and encourage more effective interdisciplinary collaboration on issues like water. If you think about the issue of water, water is a hydrological issue. This is an environmental issue. It is a microbiological issue. It is a wildlife biological issue. It is an economic issue. It is a philosophical issue. It is an issue with which our native populations have deep expertise and knowledge and interest. It is a philosophical and an ethical issue. This is an issue that only a place like UM can tackle holistically. And these communities of interdisciplinary excellence are intended to encourage work on an excellence in research on some of society's most complex problems that exist at the intersection of disciplines. And you can see at the center of these is the UM Core. And this is a draft drawing. I will have to credit Dean Tom DeLuca with his sacred geometrical depiction of how to think about this. And this is a draft. This is a work in progress. This is something that we want to get right. This is not a marketing pitch. This is a way for us to think about how the real strength of UM, one of the things that you've heard me say is the power of UM is in the and. The power of UM is not in saying, is it the sciences or the arts or the professional schools? Our power is in the and our ability to work across those disciplines. And we need to design our structures and orient our work to amplify that strength, amplify what we already do well. And that's what these are intended to do. The third area of distinction is a hallmark already of this institution and must continue to be something that we do better than any institution, is a holistic focus on student success. So we've already started steps in this direction. The organization announcement at the cabinet level restructure that I announced last month was in large measure aimed at this, to make sure that our student affairs efforts and the efforts of our Office of Student Success are together and working effectively, looking at the entire student experience. Not just the 15% of time that students spend in the classroom, but the 100% of time that students are here. Because learning happens not just in the classroom, but it happens in the residence halls. It happens in campus rec. And as we think about student retention, I want Steve Thompson with Campus Rec to be saying, you know what? The students who participate in our wilderness experience have a 10% higher retention rate than those who don't. Now, certainly there's some selection bias in there, but I don't know if the whole 10% is selection bias. And so how are we thinking about what we're doing in the classroom together with what we're doing out of the classroom to enhance that holistic student experience and improve our retention rates? I want to give great credit to the ASCRC. I think they're already working hard on this. And I think you need to push the gas pedal to the floor and keep going. I know that Brian French and the Office of Student Success and then the Student Affairs Directors, coordinated with by Amy Capalupo, have already made some progress. You're seeing some things we're doing in terms of mobile advising, getting students registered for the fall early. This is somewhere where we can all have an impact. To be clear, a retention rate of 70% from first to second year is something where we can improve. We lose 12% of our students, of our freshman students, over the winter break, and we lose 20% over the summer, a 20% summer melt. Is that ever going to be zero? No, of course not. But if we decrease that summer melt by 5%, it makes a massive difference in our enrollment. It makes a massive difference in our revenue. And more importantly, it makes a massive difference in our students' lives. So this is something that, as an institution of public higher education that is about social mobility and providing opportunity, a holistic student experience, and enabling success for students from all different walks of life, must be a strategic imperative of this institution. And we're going to do so organizationally, but you, the faculty, play a critical role in that. And this is a place where I want your feedback, I want your help. And then the final area is an appreciation of people in place. When you think about the University of Montana, we are blessed to be in this beautiful setting. We are here, as we all know, on Salish lands, and we honor and respect that culture, that heritage, and we recognize that culture diversity is a strategic imperative of this university and is something that makes this learning environment better. Diversity at all levels in our student body, in our staff, in our faculty, and our administration. And this is something that we're working on. And something that I want to, again, differentiate this university. As well as the partnership with our community. We have a not just beautiful natural environment around us, but we have a great, vibrant city of Missoula. One of the things I say when I'm at city forums is that if you want a great city, go to university and wait 100 years. We're now in our 125th year. But what we benefit from is having a great city. And we're exploring even deeper partnership with that city. I hope next week some of you attend our Innovate UM conference, where we're talking with the city about joint master planning to say, how do we spur an innovation ecosystem in Missoula and knock down the walls, the false barriers at the Clark Fork and at Arthur, and have this university and this city merge in a really positive way. That is a way for us to distinguish this university. So taken together, those four things define, I believe, and the UPC believes, a unique distinction for this university. So with that, we've, as the UPC, and together with the UPC, we've proposed an initial list of recommendations, 14 broad recommendations. There are 4 administrative recommendations and then 10 academic. And I want to just start with some of the administrative restructuring actions that we're doing. Yes, we are focused in this discussion on mostly actions in the area of academic affairs, but that's only $60-ish million of our budget. It's about half, right, of our general fund. But we got to look at the rest of it as well. And many of you heard me talk about project simplification, and we're continuing this project to look at how we simplify the processes that we do. We've started looking at HR processes, travel processes, other activities, and we're going to be scoping this out further upon the arrival of our new Vice President for Administration and Finance, and taking a hard look at how we can do things more simply. I really don't want faculty members spending an hour and a half dealing with a travel claim or dealing with an HR issue. I want to figure out ways to do that more simply, more effectively, so you can spend your time working with students, so we can streamline how we do things. That's one example. There's 20 others. We've already had ideas submitted, and we're going to be focused on this. The second point we've moved forward on is aligning and enhancing our recruiting and communications efforts. The other companion to the restructure that I talked about in terms of focusing on student success was focusing on telling the story of this university more effectively externally to bring students here. And to that end, we've brought together our recruiting and admissions and financial aid efforts together with our marketing and our communications and outreach efforts to tell the story of the great work happening at this university more effectively and to make students aware of the great opportunities we have here at UM. To be frank with you, we haven't done that as well as we should have. The perceptions of the University of Montana do not align with the reality of the great work that is happening here. And we need to fix that. That's partly budgetary, and we've added the budget back in, but it's partly structure as well. When we had bifurcated recruiting over here and communications and marketing over here, we had a lack of a consistent story. And we're working to fix that. We've got the role posted for the new vice president, and I actually just got an email a day and a half ago from someone who saw that posting, and it was an individual that leads enrollment for another university. And the note said, "I just saw your role posted, and I wanted to send you a note because I was an applicant last time you had this. And I was invited to an interview. I think he said a Skype interview, and I actually withdrew from the process. That was partly due to family reasons, but it was also due to the fact that the role wasn't structured appropriately, and that for someone to truly have an impact on enrollment, you have to have communications and marketing together with enrollment. While there is some overlap between recruiting and student affairs, those are different skill sets. And it was validation that we're on a path to bring these things together. It's not going to be fixed overnight, but we are making progress on here. And the efforts right now, just to be frank, are on enrolling the fall class for 2018. We can't change the number of applications that we have very much. We're trying, but now it's about yield. And when you see students here, greet them, stop tours, and let's get that yield rate up for the fall while we work to get interest in applications for future years. We already talked pretty in depth about integration and coordination of our student persistence and success efforts. And then we are implementing various strategies for administration efficiencies, largely, in large part, in addition to what we've talked about on the research and creative scholarship side. So Vice President Scott Wittenberg is making some adjustments over there, and we are seeing some efficiencies that we can achieve on that end. So there are administrative restructuring actions moving forward. Now I want to talk briefly about each of the academic program recommendations by college. You can see these recommendations are really in three categories. I'll get to sorry about that. The programs that are identified for reorganization, or structures identified for reorganization, programs that will be discontinued, as well as programs where we will maintain our offerings, but where we expect to see a reduction in the number of faculty in those offerings to better align with student enrollment and student needs. And so I want to make a quick point here, because where we maintain offerings, we have, in consultation of the data that we've seen, come up with initial and approximate estimates by area for the magnitude of reductions in those areas. We believe with those reductions we will be able to maintain the offerings as listed, other than the ones identified for discontinuance. I want to make three key points about that, though. These numbers are approximate. Those numbers align in areas. They are not associated with individuals. And third, we expect a very large proportion of these to occur over the next 3 years through attrition and natural departures as people leave the university. Where we cannot achieve those, or we cannot achieve those reductions through attrition, we will have curtailment in specific areas as necessary. But we're not there yet. These are initial estimates. And for those of you present at the UPC meeting and in consultation with the union yesterday, we had an in-depth discussion of, is it appropriate right now to put ballpark estimates in areas of what we think those reductions would be. And we erred on the side of transparency. We said we'd like to say this is approximately where we think they are. We want to be respectful of that, and we want to acknowledge that these are initial estimates. There will be adjustments over time, and we will figure this out, what the specific numbers are. There will be reductions, and we have endeavored to identify the ways in which we can keep our offerings to students and give our students the best, highest quality education and the most offerings and most options as possible, while addressing our budget issues. And the recommendations that will follow are a result of a deep analysis. We recognize that that analysis is not perfect, and that's why this is the beginning of a discussion.